Wait. So you're telling me Miniswarm does tablets now? Tablets? Miniswarm is doing tablets. AMD based. Low power. Power efficient. Let's unbox. So Miniswarm sent me one of their tablets. A tablet's not going to be like a mini PC, right? It's not going to be super expandable. But yet, the AMD platform for mobile, 8000 series CPUs, offers a lot of room for expandability. It's an interesting rubberized no-slip texture. This is not fabric. It's a rubberized texture, plastic keys. Not a lot of flex in the deck. Magnetic connector with pogo pins. This should be vaguely reminiscent of how the Surface tablets are. Get an ample touchpad. Ooh. Now this is a Mac-style touchpad, so it takes the same amount of click no matter where you actually click. This is actually really rare on PCs. Look at that, we got the Copilot button. Oh, Microsoft and your influences. Interesting design stand. It's just rubber. There's not, the hinge here is, it's just rubber. Bet Microsoft has a patent on the Surface style hinge. And now for the tablet. Miniswarm V3. More than we see. More than you see, more than we see. There appears to be some confusion about whether it's you or we that we see, but we see. I see. All right, that's pretty cool. Miniswarm stickers. That's actually vaguely reminiscent of like unpacking the original Apple II. Dear friend, when you open this letter, I believe you will remove all your troubles and have a smile, even with ChatGPT can't generate when you're reading it. Guess you are destined to have V3. Okay, that's interesting. Lastly, I wish you a happy every day. Thank you. Miniswarm's going for a premium unboxing experience here, which is interesting. AMD's 3-in-1 tablet. Ooh, it's surprisingly light. Ooh, it's a nice matte screen. It's a matte screen. It's an interesting design choice. I can see 2 breather holes in the back here. That's interesting. Once again, Miniswarm is showing the entire rest of the world how it's done with respect to USB-C chargers. This thing is tiny and doesn't weigh very much at all. This is Type-C and power delivery. How many watts? 20 volts is 3¼ amps, so 65 watts. Holy crap. This is 65 watts? This power brick? Look at this power brick. This is a 65 watt. This has got to be GAN. Like, this is the best of the best power brick. Like Microsoft Surface design, the position for the keyboard is 2-position. It does not appear that the Miniswarm tablet has a built-in stand. Let's get it hooked up. Now let's do some benchmarking. Now in terms of ports, on one side, you have a full USB Type-C called V-Link. We'll talk more about that in a minute. A full micro SD slot, a volume rocker, and a 3.5mm combination headphone microphone jack. On the other side, you've got 2 more USB Type-C ports, a fingerprint reader that is a combination fingerprint reader and power button. One thing I immediately noticed about the keyboard stand is that the magnet that holds it in the upper angle is nowhere near as strong as what you would experience with like a Surface-style tablet. If you scoot the laptop around, the magnet is likely to let go. But in a typing position, seems like it's reasonably okay. To get the stand to do its thing, you kind of have to unsettlingly bend it. But it does have some kind of a mechanism in there. Take a look at our fans and see if they're moving. The magnets on the back stand are not very strong either. They're strong enough, but they're not like crazy strong. Now, in terms of what the physical hardware is, this configuration is the $1,200-ish configuration, and it is an 8840U. That is a maximum of 28 watts for the TDP, although the performance of that is a little fungible. We'll take a look at that in a second. And this is running 1.1.0.2 for the Agiza. And the BIOS doesn't really give a lot of customization options or configuration options. You know, it's LPDDR5 It's SK Hynix on this configuration. Your configuration is not necessarily SK Hynix. The reported performance numbers from Ada64, I feel like they could be a little bit better, especially the read memory bandwidth only being about 50 gigabytes per second. But I couldn't point to any specific performance deficiencies because, well, the CPU Z-score is really high. This is a higher single-thread score than the 96-core Threadripper because this thing will boost like there's no tomorrow on its 8 cores and 16 threads. This CPU also features a built-in Ryzen 780M, so you can expect pretty good 780M-like performance. And the dual cooling fans and the heat pipe solution are very effective at dealing with the heat from this thing. If you are going to use it in tablet mode, I would suggest that you remove the back entirely. So the way the kickstand works is a little different. It's exactly opposite what the Microsoft Surface is. So it goes on like this, but the part that hinges is actually the part with the camera notch in it. And so it opens like this, and then that sets like that, and then it can breathe. But if it's like this, it cannot breathe. So if you're using it in tablet mode, just take the back off. The keyboard is also very satisfying. The worst part of the keyboard is that when you're using it in this elevated position, the magnet is just not very strong. In general, the magnets on this are not super strong. The kickstand magnet is reasonable. The hinge is a little unsettling when you bend it. It feels like you're going to break something, but there is a mechanical component in here, and once I got used to it, it was basically okay. The keyboard close magnets are actually stronger than the rock hinge magnets. In terms of mechanical key actuation and how the keys actually move around and feel, this feels at least as good as a Surface keyboard, maybe even a little bit better. The key spacing feels like I've got a little bit more room. It's a little easier to touch type. I also think the touchpad on this keyboard is quite a bit better than the normal Surface touchpad just because of the actuation pressure and the fact that the actuation pressure is even all across the touchpad. I have a preference there. Like I can work with a touchpad that doesn't have even touch pressure for the mechanical click, but this one is very well done. This keyboard does have a backlight with some configurable settings. You've got keyboard control for screen brightness, multimedia controls, and airplane mode. One thing that might have been cool is if there was a small battery in the keyboard and that the keyboard could work wirelessly. Fortunately, Minisforum has a separate keyboard for that. Minisforum has a wireless RGB keyboard? Yes, Minisforum has a wireless RGB keyboard that you can use with Bluetooth on this. You don't even need to use a dongle because there's no Type A USB port on this. And speaking of which, even though there's 3 USB-C ports on this, there's only 2 that are usable. The other one is actually USB-C in. You can use this as a USB-C display with a laptop. So if you're wanting to take a laptop with you and a travel monitor, you can add this to the repertoire and have a whole second backup computer, which, you know, if you're a power business user, that's a thing. Taking a backup computer. Now, in terms of Windows Hello, you got both the camera and the fingerprint option. Now, a secret to using the fingerprint reader reliably is to lift and touch. Do not slide your finger over the sensor. That's the temptation. There's a lot of oval sensors from the past where you would slide your finger. Don't do that. Don't be tempted to do that. Just lift and try to put your finger in basically the same place on the sensor every time, and the software will actually prompt you to change the angle of your finger and do that over and over again. That is your best bet for making the fingerprint reliable. But it is otherwise pretty reliable. The quality of the built-in camera is reasonable. It actually doesn't look completely terrible. It actually looks pretty good. You'll look pretty good in video conferencing. You'll look pretty good in video conferencing. So, kudos. I think it might be true that the rear camera is actually a little bit worse than the front camera, but the rear camera will get the job done. Now the storage here, it's PCIe Gen 4, but it's nothing really super special to write home about. You're going to get about 5 gigabytes per second read. The random performance is not bad with a lot of queues in the queue depth. About 1 million IOPS, which is really good. This is a Kingston OEM drive. It's an OEM 8 PG-P4 1024Q. So it's definitely not an absolute top-of-the-line drive, but this is a reasonable PCIe Gen 4, and they didn't cheap out. Internally, it is connected to a 2280. You can see the inside pictures here, the heat pipes, the fans, the breakdown. It is not technically user serviceable. You're going to have a hard time taking this apart. But the battery looks to be replaceable, and the M.2 looks to be replaceable, but Minisforum doesn't actually support customers being able to do that. So your mileage may vary. Consider that. So that might be something important to know depending on what you're thinking in terms of the maintenance side. We'll have to leave it up to iFixit to see what their repairability score is, but just based on looking at it, and it's like, I want to take it apart. And they were like, no, you shouldn't take it apart. I was like, okay, well, you sent me a picture of the inside, and the Minis Forums people said, okay, yeah, that's totally fine. So cool. But again, disassembly, not recommended, not user serviceable. Don't send it to them if you're going to have problems after you've taken it apart. The Wi-Fi solution is a Wi-Fi 6E at AX210. It's 160 megahertz by default. It's an Intel Wi-Fi solution. I think that's good. That was probably the right call. AMD plus Wi-Fi. AMD's own solutions, AMD Advantage Solutions, use MediaTek. MediaTek has a bit of a checkered past, if we're being honest. The Intel AX210, generally pretty reliable. Sometimes it can be a little hit and miss with firmware and drivers, but generally the Intel wireless solution is a little bit better. This is Wi-Fi 6E. Now, doing the battery rundown test, I usually play a YouTube video, watch Netflix, something like that. Minis Forum says about 8 hours. I think you probably could configure it to get something approaching 8 hours. I think real world usage at the lowest reasonable brightness setting, you're more in like the 5-ish hours range. But I also discovered a glitch, and I think this is a Realtek driver glitch, but this might actually be something with the speaker design. Listening to videos and actually using the device and that kind of thing, the speakers are okay. But there is one alarming thing. I was playing the Star Trek The Next Generation ambient engine noise idling, and listen to this. I hope you can hear that on the microphone. There's like, the engines on the Enterprise don't sound like that. There's something wrong in the software processing, I think, that is happening with the engine sound of good old NCC 1701D. Interestingly, this doesn't happen on Deep Space Nine. I have to admit, there are days when I can say, it's like, oh yeah, the Star Trek engine noise exposes a problem in the Realtek software driver stack that is not there when we're on Deep Space Nine. Like, I don't like that. It's amazing that I can do this and utter that sentence and be completely serious, but also discover something about a product. What a time to be alive. For a lot of my testing, I'm using this cool little Sabrent USB dock. This thing has pass-through USB-C charging. It gives me 2 Type-A ports, wired Ethernet and HDMI out, but it only takes a single USB-C port. This little thing works great with this platform, which is awesome because it gives you more connectivity in Type-A ports and it'll fit in your laptop bag. And it's a great little solution for this. Minis Forum also has the Minis Forum pin. 4096 levels of pressure. In the box, you get the pin, a user's guide, and a short little USB-C cable for charging. Now, the pin has a button, like an eraser button type thing on the top. You can use that to advance your slideshows, but you can't actually use it like an eraser. But the pin does work really well, and it also has 2 buttons. Does a reasonable job tracking the pen. In using the Apple Pen, playing around with some of Chris's stuff, there is an interesting effect, and that is when the pen is touching the screen, is the pen putting the line where the tip is touching the screen. And you can calibrate that. But one of the things that Apple talks about in their marketing stuff is how they sort of fuse the LCD and the touchscreen together. And I get kind of what Apple was talking about now, because there is a little bit of a parallax effect because the LCD screen sort of sits below the touch glass on this tablet. This tablet is one of the only tablets I've ever seen that has a matte finish. And I actually kind of like the matte finish as opposed to glossy. Like the Surface is glossy, iPads are glossy. This is a nice matte finish. But I think that puts them at a disadvantage when it comes to the touch input because you do notice a little bit of a parallax effect when you're drawing. You can also see that the line will trail behind the tip of the pen just a bit. It is very fast and it is very responsive, but I think Apple has got a solution that is quite a bit faster, which is interesting. I don't know if this is down to Windows input delays or Windows doing really dumb things like analyzing every single piece of input to see if you're typing your password into a plain text file, because that's apparently the world that we live in now, that the operating system has to spend all those cycles doing that. But this This is something else, I think. This is probably one of the better pen implementations that I've seen. The tips are replaceable, and there is a charge indicator light hidden on the flat side. There's also some magnets for holding it here on the top. They work okay. The display itself is 2560 by 1600. That's a nice aspect ratio. You've got a lot of room to work there. By default, it comes at 200% scaling, but it looks pretty sharp even if you're going to use it at 125 or 100% scaling. The matte screen does affect the sharpness if you're going to run it at 100% scaling, like as a secondary monitor or on an arm where the monitor sits a little close. I don't think that I would run this display at 100% scaling because at the end of the day, it's only 14 inches. Minis Forum has some nice drawings and diagrams of the dimensions of this particular device, the keyboard, and the accessories, so you can get a feel for how big this is and how much it's going to weigh in your bag and that sort of things. This actually feels lighter to me than like a Surface Pro 3 or 4, owing to the fact that this is not, this is a mix of metal and plastic construction as opposed to, Microsoft going off the deep end with an all metal and glass construction. But this doesn't feel cheap. There's no flex in it. There's no flex in the deck of the keyboard, at least no more than you get with a Surface. And the build quality feels really premium. I'm also happy with how quiet it is, even when the fans ramp up. And the, sides, I believe those are just for audio and not breathing, but I could be wrong about that. Now, what about off-label use cases? Hey, look at that, Radeon 7 and a Thunderbolt dock. This is our good old Cooler Master Thunderbolt dock, which is amazing. Now, so the bundled cable that came with the GAN charger, it's good for charging. It's not good for Thunderbolt. Well, technically, this isn't Thunderbolt. This is PCIe tunneling over USB-C, but AMD's variety. But if you happen to have a Cooler Master Thunderbolt dock, this is compatible with that. Now, Thunderbolt 3 in 2024 is an absolutely anemic amount of bandwidth. Intel's about 2 years late with Thunderbolt 5. Sorry. It's true, though. Thunderbolt 3 is 40 gigabits worth of bandwidth on its best day. And you could run a display like, Radeon 6600, 2060, 3060 maybe. It's just barely starting to bottleneck. GPD makes the G1. You can use the G1 with this. That works. But the G1's kind of expensive for what it is. A lot of the time, because of the cryptocurrency mining craze, you can get like a gigabyte gaming box like the G1 with a 1070. Who wants a 1070 anymore? You used to be able to get those without a GPU on eBay for like $50 each. That would be perfect for this because you could use it with a low power GPU. In our case, a Radeon 7 was detected correctly by this laptop as perfectly usable, which is kind of a miracle considering it's a Radeon 7. The Radeon 7 was a widely misunderstood card. It was perfectly reasonable, but the driver support and I wish things had turned out differently on the gaming and driver side, but in terms of raw compute and some of the fun stuff that you could do with it in terms of side missions, the Radeon 7 was a lot of fun. And that's pretty much it for this review. I've got to check out Linux on this because this is an 8000 series AMD APU and it could have good Linux support or it might have terrible Linux support. I'm just not sure. But if you're looking for a Windows 11 laptop, tablet, it's 3-in-1. What's the third thing? What's when you use it with the kickstand without the keyboard? It's just a media device. Technically 4-in-1 because you could also use it as a monitor, like USB-C alt mode. Like you just plug that in and then it doesn't use the computer part of it. You're just using the display part of it, which is actually pretty brilliant of Minis Forum to do that. Like, good job, fellas. That's fantastic. I'm surprised how capable this machine is. And in terms of like US retail prices, $1,200 is reasonable for the package that you get here. Like if you go in Best Buy and you look at something like this, you're gonna spend that. There's actually aspects of this package that are really premium. There are a couple of things that need more polish, like the drivers, maybe a BIOS update, maybe some things to configure the RAM, because if it were me personally, I think I would rather run 6000 1-to-1 with better memory read throughput and lower latency than what we see here. But this isn't bad. It's okay. It's not the worst I've seen. The performance overall, because it is, an 8840U with 780M graphics, that package from AMD is very capable, especially in the power envelope that we're talking about here. And if you wanted to run it at a lower power envelope, you can. When I did my testing, it was unbalanced, but it was just doing a video. So the CPU should have been as hardcore asleep as it possibly could be with the 5.5 hour runtime, which I would like to see as better. Like, we've seen AMD laptops, like 7000 series AMD laptops with a similar 58 watt hour battery getting, 8 hours plus. But overall, in this form factor, 5-6 hours of battery life for this amount of computational horsepower and all the bells and whistles in terms of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, this thing trying to connect and do stuff. Okay, 5.5 hours, I'll take it. All right, so running back-to-back sessions with Cinebench 24 on external power, but on the balanced power profile. Worst case scenario, temperatures like 67 degrees C, 68 degrees C. It's very, very impressive. Now, I've not closed off the fans. It can breathe properly. So maybe not all that impressive because, the fans are going and doing their thing, but I think it's impressive. I think this is pretty good. Overall, if anything, I'm shocked that Minis Forum was able to put together something so complete and cohesive. Like, who did they partner with on this? This is a nice piece of kit. If you have any tests that you'd like to see me run or take an application for a spin, Linux tests, be on the lookout for Linux tests. For a first volley out of the gate from Minis Forum, this is really shockingly good. And I hope Minis Forum continues with this. I think they're on to something because the conventional market for this kind of stuff is ripe for disruption. It's been the same thing for like 7-8 years now. And it's a little tiresome, and there's some innovative stuff that nobody else has in this form factor. And I think Minis Forum can probably change the direction of the industry and other companies that are making this kind of stuff if they continue to innovate, like with the client DisplayPort alt mode in the V-Link USB-C port on this other side, so that you can just use this as a display. That's actually really cool. The touch functions and that sort of thing don't work as a display. And the reason for that is strange, because Windows doesn't really support more than one touch display device at a time anymore. Like, that used to be true, but is no longer true because Windows is rotting from the inside out. Like, why would you need more than one touch device? I don't know. If you plug a touch monitor into a touch laptop. But anyway, I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. I'm signing out, and you can find me in the Level 1 forums.